Welcome to the Toyota Solutions studio. Joining me now is a woman that's been called a whistleblower for exposing human rights abuses on an island off the coast of Australia, Viktoria Vibhakar. Victoria, it's great to have you here in the studio to talk about this really important, not so well publicized issue. Start with the basics. You've been working with asylum seekers. These are people that have arrived by boat with the intention of going to Australia, right?
Right.
But Australia says, no, we don't want you here. We're going to detain you on an island offshore.
Right, so Nauru is a sovereign country. It's an island in the Pacific, and it's about 21 kilometers, and you can walk around it in about 3 hours, drive around it in 30 minutes, and it's part of Australia's policy of deterrence. So they say that we want to break the back of people smugglers, we want to stop people from making dangerous boat journeys, and so what we're going to do is we're not going to allow them to actually resettle in Australia, we're not going to process their claims in Australia, or instead we're going to hold them on Nauru. We're going to pay Nauru a huge amount of money to detain them in a detention facility there. And I worked for, I believe, 9 months flying in and out to Nauru as a senior child protection worker for Save the Children Australia.
Okay, so some of us that have been following this refugee crisis have understood that on Nauru there are a lot of reports of sexual abuse of minors, of rapes of women, of abhorrent sanitary conditions. But you are one of the few people that have actually worked with these refugees. So tell me, paint us a picture of what's really going on there.
So when I worked on Nauru, which was 2013 to 2014, my task was to promote the well-being of children and to work in the area of child protection. And there is actually no systematic framework to protect children. So Nauru is a developing country. It itself doesn't have adequate laws to protect children for its own local population. The detention facility sits outside of the community and is controlled by the Australian government. And what that means is that no information is really allowed to leave Nauru except for people like me who've become whistleblowers. And what
whistleblowers,
it also,
because you actually were not supposed to report.
Right.
And why is that? Why aren't you allowed to talk about and take pictures of what's happening there?
Well, I think it's very clear that the Australian government does not want people to know how poorly it's treating refugees. It obviously hurts its international reputation to be in breach of the Convention Against Torture, and it doesn't want people to know the human rights violations and the abuses that are going there, because I believe that if the Australian population truly knew the extent of the abuse, the extent of the misery that is created by these Australian policies, they would not support them.
Have Australian lawmakers gone to that island to see what's happening?
So we had one lawmaker that, in particular from the Greens Party, Sarah Hanson-Young, that went in 2013. We were told not to talk to her when I worked for Save the Children Australia because she had a political agenda. So she went to look at the conditions herself. I believe that people from other politicians have gone, but I don't know that they actually go into the detention.
The policy hasn't changed?
The policy has not changed. And despite the fact that we've brought to attention, there's a handful of us now that have brought to attention the human rights violations, which we have documented extremely well in reports to Senate inquiries. The Australian government is determined to continue to harm these people that are actually seeking our protection and are Australia's responsibility under international law to protect.
Talk about the children, because I know that you're getting a doctorate and that the trauma that children in detention experience is part of your research. What did you experience firsthand there?
So if I can just clarify, so I'm getting my PhD in the area of child traumatic stress, but my area is not specifically focused on refugees or detention.
But certainly these children are refugees and they're experiencing trauma.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's very clear there's a huge amount of research already that substantiates that detention itself causes trauma. And what happens is families and children, they don't have their refugee claims assessed, and so they wait for limbo for months and months and now years. A lot of them have been there for 3.5 years, not knowing if they're going to have any kind of place to resettle, what their opportunities will be, whether they'll be required to return home to their country. And you can imagine if you fled a place where it hasn't been safe, and it takes months and months, or in some cases years, for the government to determine if you actually qualify as a refugee and determine that they're going to accept your claim. You can imagine living with that uncertainty.
Well, the instability. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, as a parent, you hear all the time about the importance of stability for children.
Exactly.
Not only does that not seem provided for in this situation, but it seems like there's actually harms that they're exposed to.
Yes, there's harms they're exposed to in the detention environment. So as time goes on, people's mental health deteriorate, they become hopeless. So children are exposed to adults becoming despairing of their future. They're exposed to suicide attempts, self-harm attempts, protest activity, conflict, altercations with security guards, violence, and every day that children are in detention is a risk that they're going to be exposed to a new form of trauma. And we do know that these things really harm children when they see parents and other adults who are supposed to be the safe people, the people that children go to for reassurance, when they start to actually feel hopeless about their future, and children see that.
Yeah,
you
they
can imagine the fear and uncertainty. Yeah, that would cause.
What are your hopes right now? I mean, are you seeing signs that action may occur, that there might be, that the process could be expedited, that there may be a home for some of these refugees?
Well, I know that the U.S.-Australia deal is on the table. I do hope that Australian politicians will recognize through international pressure that the importance of resettling refugees, they're clearly Australia's responsibility, but I believe that what's most important is for them to be resettled in a safe country that can meet their health and emotional and financial needs to be able to have a future. And I think that what's so important about a forum like Women of the World is that it actually causes light to shine, harshly sometimes, and needed light to shine on policies that are actually very harmful, that are being perpetrated by countries that actually know better and have more than enough resources to do justice by the refugees that are there. And so I hope that this conference will bring more awareness and more international pressure to the issue. And hope that the government of Australia will take notice.
Well, I certainly hope your voice has that multiplying effect on the influencers here. Viktoria, Vibhakar, thank you so much for joining us and for your insights on what's happening.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.